I thought Christmas morning would finally bring peace. We were surrounded by family laughter and glittering decorations. Everything was wrapped in warmth and lights. Then Sophie opened her gift, and my world went silent. Her hands trembled. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked up at me and said something that made my heart split open. That toy belonged to Eli. But Eli was gone. Taken from me 6 years ago on a sunny picnic day we could never speak of again. Until now. Because the toy in that box wasn't a memory. It was evidence. And suddenly I knew someone in that house had lied. Stay with me till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far the truth really spreads. I'm Lauren. I'm 42 and I live in Denver with my daughter Sophie. She's 10 with my late husband's dark eyes and my stubborn jawline. We've been on our own for 6 years now. 6 Christmases. 6 birthdays. 6 first days of school. All without Eli. This Christmas, I agreed to spend the day at my parents' house. It was Sophie who asked. She said it would be nice to see her cousins and I didn't have the heart to say no. I hadn't stepped foot in that house since Eli disappeared. Since the day everything stopped making sense. The morning had that forced kind of warmth. Lila, my sister Jessica's daughter, was running around with frosting on her chin. The fireplace was crackling too loud. My mother kept pouring eggnog like she was trying to keep everyone from asking real questions. I smiled when people looked at me, but inside, I counted the hours until we could leave. Then Sophie opened the gift. It was just a small box. Brown paper, red ribbon. Her little hands tugged at the knot with quiet excitement. I remember the exact moment her smile faded. Her shoulders stiffened. Her face turned pale, like the color had drained right through her feet. She whispered my name, not Mom or Mama, just Lauren. Her voice was shaky. She held up the toy car like it was something poisonous. It was plastic old, a little chipped. One of the wings was snapped off, and on the side, drawn in blue marker, was a crooked smiley face. I couldn't breathe. I stared at it for a second, maybe 2, before I took it from her. My fingers trembled. I turned it over in my hand. I didn't need to see the faded initial scratched into the bottom to know whose it was. It was Eli's. It was the same toy he wouldn't go anywhere without. The one I drew on with a marker during a meltdown at a grocery store just to make him laugh. The same toy he clutched in his tiny hand when we walked into that campground 6 years ago. The one he held when I last saw him. For a second, the sounds in the room vanished. No more fire. No more chatter. Just the sound of my own heart beating against my ribs like it wanted out. Sophie was staring at me with wide, wet eyes. She said Lila gave it to her, that it was a gift, that her Aunt Jessica helped wrap it. I looked across the room and saw Jessica laughing with someone by the fridge. She hadn't seen us, hadn't noticed. My legs moved on their own. I got up, walked to the bathroom, and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub, holding that car like it was made of glass. My chest was tight. My throat ached with something between rage and disbelief. There was no way this was a coincidence. No way another kid had the exact same toy with the exact same break, the same ink, the same worn edges. I remembered the way Eli used to sleep with it under his pillow. How he wouldn't even let me wash it. How he once cried for hours when he thought he'd lost it at preschool. And now it was here, wrapped, gifted, sitting in my daughter's lap like a quiet bomb waiting to go off. I didn't come out of the bathroom for 20 minutes. I just sat there holding it, trying to stay upright, trying to stop my brain from spinning down every road I'd sealed off years ago. When I walked back out, Jessica was helping Mom in the kitchen. Neither of them looked at me. Sophie was sitting by the window, knees pulled up to her chest, the toy still in her hand. I knelt beside her. I asked if Lila said anything else. Sophie nodded. She said Lila told her it was from an old box in their basement, that her mom said it was junk no one remembered, that she could give it away. I felt something crack in me. Not a break, not a collapse. Just a shift. Like the world had tilted ever so slightly off its axis. I knew in that exact moment that the story we'd all accepted, the story of Eli vanishing into thin air, wasn't over. And maybe it had never been true at all. I used to think the worst pain a mother could feel was childbirth. That sharp, immediate ache followed by relief and joy. But that's not true. The worst pain is silence. It's calling your child's name and hearing nothing. Not footsteps. Not a cry. Just wind and leaves and the sound of your own panic rising. It happened in late spring. We were at a family picnic in the woods near Estes Park, just a weekend getaway. Eli had just turned 5. He wore a navy hoodie with a dinosaur on the back and his favorite sneakers that lit up when he ran. I remember brushing the hair from his forehead that morning, telling him not to wander too far from the picnic tables. There were maybe 20 of us. Aunts, uncles, cousins' laughter. For a moment, I let go. I was helping Jessica pass out sandwiches. It couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. But when I turned to check on him, he was gone. At first, it was denial. I thought he'd just wandered to the creek. Maybe chasing a butterfly. Maybe hiding in a game. I called his name with a smile, trying not to sound nervous. Then I called it louder. Then louder again. My hands started shaking. My legs turned cold. We searched the campground for hours. People fanned out, shouted his name, checked under benches inside tents behind trees. I ran so hard and so fast, I scraped my knees and didn't even feel it. A ranger eventually called local police. When the sun went down, they brought in dogs and flashlights and too many questions I didn't know how to answer. There were no cameras in that area. No cell service for most of the grounds. No footprints. No signs of struggle. No stranger spotted in the woods. It was like he had simply disappeared, like the forest had swallowed him whole. The investigation went on for months. Flyers, news reports, a hotline. My phone rang at all hours with tips that led nowhere. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. My husband and I began to fight over every little thing. Grief changed our voices, sharpened our silence. One morning, he packed a bag and said he couldn't take it anymore. I didn't blame him. I couldn't take it either. I quit my job at the library. I couldn't look at storybooks without hearing Eli's voice asking me to read one more page. I stopped answering friends' messages. Most of them stopped asking after a while. People don't know how to sit with your sadness. They want it to wrap up nicely. They want a happy ending. But my story had none. After 2 years, the police closed the active investigation. Said they had no new leads. No signs of foul play. Just a cold file in a drawer. I remember the way the officer looked at me when he said it. Like he was sorry, but not sorry enough. There were nights I sat on the kitchen floor with Eli's baby blanket in my lap, wondering if he was cold. If he was scared. If he still remembered my face. The guilt was constant. It lived under my skin. I should have held his hand tighter. I should have paid attention. I should have screamed sooner. Sophie was only 4 when it happened. Too young to understand. But she watched me fall apart. She watched me scream into pillows, punch the walls crumble into pieces. And somehow she was the one who kept me alive. She'd crawl into bed with me and lay her tiny hand on my cheek. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. She was warm and present, and she was still mine. I clung to her like driftwood in the middle of a storm. There were days I wanted to disappear too. To walk into the woods and not come back. But Sophie needed a mother. And even if I was only half alive, I had to show up for her. I had to smile when she brought me drawings. I had to answer her questions about school. I had to make her believe she was enough, even when I couldn't feel anything at all. The grief didn't get smaller. I just got better at carrying it. It became part of my body, a shadow stitched into my bones. There wasn't a moment, not one, where I didn't think of Eli. I imagined what he'd look like now. Taller, thinner, a gap-toothed grin. Would he still carry that toy? Car would he remember the way I used to sing him to sleep? I kept his room untouched for 2 years. Then one morning I packed it up. Not because I had moved on, but because I couldn't keep waking up and walking past a shrine. I placed everything in boxes, labeled them with care, stored them in the attic, except the toy car, the one with the broken wing and the blue ink smile. That one had disappeared with him. Until today. There's something about walking back into your childhood home that makes you feel small again. But this time it wasn't comfort or nostalgia waiting for me at the door. It was the kind of quiet that hums beneath the surface, like a warning you can't quite name. My parents had decorated like nothing had ever happened. A massive tree in the corner, garland over every doorway, candles flickering on every surface. Bing Crosby played softly in the background, and the scent of cinnamon filled the air. It was warm, cozy, designed to distract. I stood there with Sophie coat still on, while people chatted around us like we were ghosts. No one said welcome back. No one said it's been too long. My mother waved vaguely from the kitchen, already reaching for another tray of cookies. My father poured drinks like he was hosting a fundraiser, not a family gathering. His voice was louder than usual, punctuating every joke with a laugh that felt a little too forced. People clapped along. No one asked me how I was doing. Jessica passed me in the hallway and didn't even meet my eyes. She smelled like expensive shampoo and peppermint. She smiled at Sophie, tousled her hair, then moved on like I wasn't standing there at all. She lived in the basement now, had moved back after her last breakup, and as far as I knew, never left. She hadn't called me once since Eli disappeared. Not a text. Not a letter. Not even a one-line message on my birthday. The dining room was full of noise. Clinking glasses. Kids running around. Conversations that danced around safe topics like work and weather and holiday sales. I sat on the couch clutching my coffee, nodding when spoken to, trying to ignore how heavy my chest felt. When someone mentioned a story about a missing child they'd seen on the news, my aunt's hand shot out and gripped their wrist. She said it was too sad for Christmas. Said we should keep things light. Someone quickly changed the subject to casserole. Later in the kitchen, my mother pulled a tray from the oven and casually asked me if I'd finally let go of the past. Like Eli was a phase I'd been slow to grow out of. She said Sophie was getting so big and I should focus on the present. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I looked around and realized no one here wanted to remember him. Not really. It made things uncomfortable. Messy. Easier to pretend he was never part of the picture. Just a boy whose name made the lights dim when spoken aloud. They'd boxed up my grief and placed it in the attic along with the toys and photos and the hope that used to live in this house. Jessica once told someone at a family barbecue that she barely remembered Eli. That it was all so long ago. I had overheard it. I never forgot. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was the noise. The laughter that felt like it was trying to bury something. The way my father offered seconds to everyone avoiding my side of the table completely. The way my mother kissed Sophie's head but never looked me in the eye. It was pretending. This entire house had become an altar to pretending. Pretending nothing happened. Pretending Eli never existed. Pretending I wasn't still shattered into pieces too small to sweep up. I stayed because Sophie wanted to be there. Because she deserved some kind of joy. But every minute in that house felt like I was holding my breath. like if I spoke too loudly, the whole fragile illusion would fall apart. And maybe it should have. Maybe I should have screamed. But instead, I smiled. I helped pass the potatoes. I listened to my sister talk about work as if her basement wasn't built above a grave. In that house, grief had no place. And neither did I. I waited until the living room had quieted, until Sophie was tucked beside me, and the laughter from the kitchen had faded into a background hum. I held the toy in both hands, turning it over like it might fall apart from my touch. The weight of it felt wrong. Familiar. Too familiar. The break in the wing wasn't just similar. It was identical. Same jagged edge, like a tooth snapped halfway. My eyes caught the faded blue mark on the side, and I stopped breathing. That wasn't a random smudge. That was a smiley face. Crooked and lopsided exactly the way I had drawn it all those years ago when Eli cried after scraping his knee. I remembered the way he clutched it under his pillow. The tantrums when it went missing behind the couch. The night he refused to eat until I promised to hold it while he fell asleep. There was no mistaking this toy. It wasn't a copy or a coincidence. It was his. I asked Sophie again who gave it to her. Her voice was quiet, a whisper against the chaos of my mind. She said it came from Lila, that Aunt Jessica had helped wrap it. That Lila said it came from some old box in their basement stuff. Her mom said nobody remembered. My skin went cold. My mouth was dry. I asked her to repeat it, and she did this time with more confusion than fear. She asked if something was wrong. I told her no, that everything was fine, and I kissed the top of her head like I wasn't shaking. I stood up slowly and walked to the hallway. Every step felt like walking through water. The noise around me blurred. Plates clinking. Someone laughing. Jessica's voice drifting up the stairs. I stared at the toy still in my hand like it might dissolve into smoke if I blinked. There was no reason for her to have this. No excuse. No explanation that made sense. Eli had that toy in his hand the day he vanished. We searched for it, cried for it, prayed with it. And now it was here wrapped like a gift under a tree. My fingers dialed the police before I could second-guess myself. I didn't even know what I planned to say. But I knew I couldn't hold this alone. I needed someone to hear me, to take it seriously, to tell me I wasn't crazy for seeing a ghost inside a plastic car. As I stood by the front door, phone pressed to my ear, the chill of the air outside bled through the glass. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over. It had never been over. Something was wrong, and it had been wrong for a very long time. Jessica didn't even flinch when I asked her. She looked at me like I had asked about the weather, like my voice didn't shake or my hands weren't clenched at my sides. She smiled, that tight-lipped smile she always used when she thought someone was being dramatic. She said she didn't know what I was talking about, that the toy must be a coincidence, that she had no memory of where it came from and certainly didn't recognize it. I asked her again, sharper this time. I told her about the ink, the broken wing, the smiley face I drew. Her expression didn't change. She said maybe I was remembering it wrong. Maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see. My mother walked in halfway through and placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder like it was rehearsed. She said it was Christmas, that this wasn't the time, that digging up pain wouldn't bring anyone back. My father stood behind them, arms crossed, not saying a word, but letting his silence speak for him. When I said the police were on their way, he sighed like I had embarrassed everyone, like I had ruined something precious. The officers arrived quietly, professional, kind, in a distant way. I handed over the toy and explained everything I could. My voice wavered, but I stayed standing. They listened, took notes, examined the car. One of them even nodded in recognition when I described the history behind it. But then they said there wasn't enough to move forward, that the toy by itself didn't prove anything, that unless someone admitted more, it would stay logged but wouldn't change the status of the case. Jessica stood near the window, arms folded, watching the snow fall, like none of this had anything to do with her. My parents offered the officers coffee and asked if they needed anything else. Not one of them looked at me. When the door closed behind the police, I felt the floor tilt beneath me. I had expected anger, denial, maybe even shouting. But what I got was worse. Calm, polite condescension, the kind of dismissal that makes you question your own breath. Jessica walked past me without a word. My mother touched my arm and told me she was worried, that I seemed overwhelmed, that maybe I should take a break from chasing ghosts. I stood in the hallway, surrounded by the people who raised me, and felt like a stranger. Not one of them believed me. Or maybe they did and just didn't care enough to say it out loud. That night, I sat alone on the edge of the guest bed with the silence pressing against my skin. Sophie was asleep beside me, her small body curled into the blankets. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for something to shift. But nothing did. I had never felt so alone. And I knew then whatever this was, I would have to face it by myself. I didn't tell anyone I was hiring him. I knew if I did, it would get back to my parents and then to Jessica. I wasn't ready to hear one more person tell me to let it go. His name was Mason, retired detective. He specialized in cold cases, especially missing children. He didn't ask me why I waited 6 years. He just said he needed everything I remembered. I gave him the police reports, photos, a map of the campground from that day. I marked where we'd been sitting, where Eli had played, where I last saw him. I even told him what I packed for lunch. Every detail mattered now. Mason worked fast. He called me 3 days later to say he had found something. Not proof, not yet, but something. Jessica. According to his interviews, she wasn't with the group for a stretch of time that afternoon. Somewhere around 1 and 4, no one recalled seeing her. They assumed she had gone to take a nap or get something from the car. But no one remembered her coming back with anything. No one asked questions at the time. That was the first thread. Then, Mason pulled footage from a gas station about 15 miles from the campground. The footage was long gone, but the clerk was still there. When Mason showed her Jessica's photo, she paused. Said she remembered that woman. She had come in that afternoon, paid in cash, looked nervous. And she wasn't alone. The clerk remembered a boy. Small, brown hair, quiet, wrapped in a red scarf that seemed too big for him. She said she'd noticed the scarf because it had a pattern of tiny reindeer and snowflakes. She remembered thinking it looked handmade. I didn't cry when Mason told me. I just listened, one hand pressed flat on the table like I was bracing for something. The scarf. I had knitted it myself. Eli wore it the morning he disappeared. I tied it around his neck just before we left the house. I remember how he grumbled about it itching his chin. It was still missing when we packed up the campground. That was the second thread. I thanked Mason and asked him to keep going. But I didn't tell anyone what he'd found. Not yet. Instead, I started watching Jessica differently. The way she moved around the house. The way she avoided Sophie's eyes when she asked about the toy. The way her smile tightened when people brought up the past. It didn't feel like grief. It felt like guilt. I didn't sleep much those nights. I lay awake thinking about all the ways she could have done it. If it was planned. If it was spontaneous. If it was a cruel moment of jealousy or something deeper that had always been there. I started to question every memory, every family gathering, every offhand comment. I wondered if she ever felt remorse, or if she believed I was too broken to ever put the pieces together. But I was putting them together, quietly, slowly, with hands that were steadier now than they had been in years. I told Mason to stay close to the gas station angle, to track down anyone else who might have been working that day, to see if any footage still existed from nearby stores or traffic cameras. He said he would try. He said he had a feeling about this. I started keeping a journal again. Not the kind for grief, but for facts. Names, times, quotes, things people said and didn't say. I didn't trust my memory alone anymore. Sophie began to notice I was different. Quieter, more focused. She asked if I was okay, and I said yes. I kissed her forehead and told her everything was fine. She looked at me for a long time and didn't believe me. But I was doing it for her, for Eli, for the years I'd spent begging for closure and getting silence in return. And deep down, I knew I was getting close. Something was unraveling. I could feel it. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers. It started with a bill, folded between old family papers my mother kept in a metal tin under the sink. I wasn't looking for it. I had gone down to grab Sophie's gloves from a forgotten box. The tin was half open. Something told me to look. Inside were yellow documents, insurance forms, and clipped recipes. I flipped through without thinking until I found it. A hospital discharge sheet. The name at the top was Jessica's. The date was from 15 years ago. My breath caught. The line that mattered wasn't even bolded. It just said postpartum recovery. Infant released to third party. I read it again. And again. My eyes blurred, but the words stayed the same. Jessica had a baby. I sat on the cold tile floor, the paper trembling in my hand. She would have been 19. In college, supposedly. My parents said she was studying abroad that summer. She never mentioned a child. Never once. I waited until Sophie was asleep that night and walked into the kitchen where my mother was folding napkins. I placed the paper in front of her. I didn't say a word. Just watched her face. She didn't flinch. She barely looked surprised. She sighed, folded the napkin again, and told me it wasn't my business. I asked how no one thought I should know. She said it was Jessica's choice. That she was young. That she was scared. That they handled it the best way they knew how. Like it was just another mistake to sweep under the rug. I stared at her like she was a stranger. She told me we don't air dirty laundry. That some things are better left buried. I asked how many other things they buried. She didn't answer. I walked out of the room before I screamed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every year of my life and wondering what else I missed. What else they didn't tell me. What Jessica was capable of. If she could carry a baby, give it up, and move on without a word, then what else could she do? If my parents could cover that up, they could cover anything. This wasn't about privacy. It was about control, about image, about choosing what kind of pain was allowed to be acknowledged and what kind was not. I felt like I was drowning in a family I never really knew. And for the first time, I didn't want to come up for air. Once I knew about the pregnancy, everything else started clicking into place. Things I had ignored. Things I had explained away because that's what families do. They forgive, they excuse, they forget. But now I couldn't forget. I remembered the time Jessica told her boyfriend she had cancer. She shaved off chunks of her hair and wore scarves like she was fighting for her life. He stayed, gave her money, slept on the hospital floor. Only later, after he caught her in another lie, did he find out it was all made up. Then there was the credit card. My parents' joint account that kept dipping lower every month. They never said anything, but I heard my mother once whisper that it was fine. Jessica needed help. She was going through something. But it wasn't help. It was habit. She lied to get what she wanted. And when that stopped working, she lied to avoid consequences. She told people she had a degree she never earned. She told me she got promoted when she'd actually been let go. She let our parents smooth it all over with their silence. The more I thought about it, the more I saw how often she twisted reality. She made herself the victim in every story. She had a way of crying that turned everything around. My mother used to say Jessica was sensitive, but I knew now it wasn't sensitivity. It was survival through manipulation. She always hated how people looked at me, said I was the golden child, that everything came easy for me. She said it like a joke, but I don't think she ever meant it as one. The year Eli was born, Jessica didn't come visit until weeks later. When she held him, she barely smiled, said he had my nose, handed him back like he was warm laundry, and left early. I think she resented how much I loved him, how much he loved me, how even broken I still had a purpose, a reason to get up every day, a child who clung to me like I was his whole world. And when Eli disappeared, she was quiet, too quiet, not cold, not concerned, just careful. She said all the right things, but avoided all the hard ones. Now looking back, I see her clearly. Someone who hid in plain sight, who knew exactly how far she could go before anyone would call her out. She had lied before, about little things, about big things, about things that hurt people. So why not this? Why not Eli? Why not me? It came late on a Thursday when I had nearly stopped checking. The old email was tied to the search group we formed after Eli disappeared. I hadn't used it in years. But something made me log in that night, like a nudge I couldn't explain. The message had no subject line, just a single photo. No words, no name, no explanation. I clicked on it slowly. My hand hovered above the mouse as if touching it too fast might break the moment. When the image loaded, I stopped breathing. A boy, lying on a narrow bed with thin sheets. His back was to the wall. His face turned slightly toward the camera. Brown hair, brown eyes, small shoulders, the same tilt of his head, the same soft curve in his jaw that Eli had at 5. But what made me gasp wasn't his face. It was what was tied to the bedpost. A scarf, red, worn at the edges, the same one I wrapped around Eli the day he vanished. I knew that scarf. I made it. I would know it anywhere. My hands trembled as I enlarged the photo. The scarf had a snag on the left side. I remembered that snag. It happened when Eli caught it on a fence at the park. I had promised to fix it and never did. I stared at the screen until tears blurred my vision. I blinked hard, and still the image was there. The boy, the scarf, the possibility that I hadn't dared let myself imagine in years. I forwarded the email to Mason, told him everything. He told me to breathe, told me to stay calm, that he'd handle it. The photo was traced to an unregistered address. Nothing solid, but the scarf gave us enough to bring it to the police. For the first time in years, they reopened the file. They took my blood, sent it to a lab, said it would take weeks, maybe more. I said I could wait. I had waited this long. Every day felt like a countdown I didn't understand. I tried not to stare at the photo, but I couldn't help it. I memorized every detail of the boy's face. The way his hand rested near his cheek, the tiny bump in the middle of his nose that looked just like his father's. When the call came, I was in the kitchen stirring soup I wasn't going to eat. The officer's voice was calm, but I could feel the shift in the air before he spoke. The DNA was a match. Not perfect, but high, 87%. Enough to say, this boy was mine. I sank to the floor, spoon still in my hand. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there letting the warmth from the stove hit my face while my heart tried to catch up. He was alive. Somewhere my son was breathing, growing, waiting. It felt like hope. And it felt like morning all over again. Because now I didn't just know what I had lost. I knew it was still out there waiting to be found. Jessica sat in the small gray room like she had just wandered in from a nap. Her hands folded her legs, crossed her mouth, pulled into that same soft smile she wore when pretending nothing was wrong. She didn't look scared. She looked tired. The detective asked simple questions, repeated what Sophie had said, what Lila had added. The toy, the scarf, the timeline, the gas station, the boy. Jessica didn't speak at first, just stared at the table. Her fingers tapped once, then again. Then she said, almost bored, that she never meant for it to go that far. The detective didn't flinch. He asked what she meant. She said she took him, that she didn't plan it exactly, but it had been building for a long time. That day at the picnic, she saw Eli wandering toward the woods. No one noticed, so she followed. She told him they were going on a ride, that his mommy said it was okay. He trusted her. He got in the car. He didn't cry. She drove for nearly 2 hours, found the place through someone she had met online, a woman who ran something for kids who needed to disappear. No paperwork, no records, no names. She left him with a blanket, his toy, and the red scarf. Told the woman she couldn't take care of him anymore. Paid in cash. Got back in the car and drove home before dinner. She didn't check on him again. Not once. She said it like it was nothing, like she had dropped off dry cleaning. Her voice never cracked. She didn't cry. She said she didn't think he'd survive. Or maybe she did and didn't care. The detective asked why. Her eyes stayed fixed on the wall. She said Lauren always had everything. The husband, the house, the perfect child. She said it like a list, like an excuse. She said no one ever saw her. No one ever chose her. Not even their parents. So she chose herself. Just once. Just to feel in control. She said she didn't plan to hurt him. She thought he'd be fine. She told herself it would all fade, that Lauren would move on. When she realized Eli might still be alive, she panicked. The toy had been a mistake. She thought Lila wouldn't care, that Sophie wouldn't remember. Jessica said she didn't want to be a villain, that she had made one mistake, that she had suffered too. The detective didn't answer, just kept writing. When the tape stopped, Jessica slumped in the chair and asked for water. She looked thinner than before, smaller, not like someone haunted, just someone empty. They led her away in handcuffs, quietly. No yelling, no drama. And I sat in my car across the street, staring at the door she disappeared through. My chest didn't rise. My hands didn't move. Because the truth wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It whispered. And now I knew what her silence had been hiding all along. There are mornings when I wake up and forget what month it is. My body still holds the weight of winters that never ended. But now there's a sliver of something different. Not peace. Not yet. Just breath. The police confirmed Eli is alive. They said he's in a temporary care home. They won't let me see him until everything is cleared. Until they're sure it's safe. Until they prepare him. They say he doesn't remember much. That he's quiet. That he stares at the window a lot. I picture him doing that. Watching the world and not knowing who to trust. I send in letters. Soft ones. Nothing heavy. I tell him I love him. That I never stopped. That I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Sometimes I fold drawings Sophie makes and tuck them inside. Rainbows. Dinosaurs. Stick figures labeled Mommy, me, and Eli. She doesn't know what trauma means, but she knows what family feels like. Every night before bed, she climbs into my lap and asks when her brother is coming home. I run my fingers through her hair and say soon. Very soon. She believes me. I wish I did too. There are hours when doubt creeps in, when I wonder if he'll even recognize me, if he'll hate me for not finding him sooner, if he'll be someone new, someone I have to meet all over again. But then I remember the toy, the smiley face in blue ink, the scarf with the snag, the way something from his past found its way back to us. I hold on to that. My world isn't fixed. The cracks are still there, but I walk through each day with more than grief. I walk with purpose, with a reason. I still see Jessica's face in dreams. Sometimes she's holding Eli's hand. Sometimes she's locking a door behind him. I always wake up before I can pull him back. But dreams are not truth. Truth is that I'm still his mother, whether he remembers or not, whether he comes home tomorrow or months from now. And I will be here, always, waiting, ready. Because even when the world tried to take everything, love never left. It stayed, quiet, strong, unbreakable. I don't speak to my parents anymore. After the confession, they said very little. No apology, no questions, just silence, the same kind they gave me when Eli vanished. The kind that protects everything but the truth. I packed up our things and moved out of Denver. Sophie and I found a small house with a creaky porch and a wide kitchen window. Somewhere that didn't echo with old pain. For the first time in 6 years, we say Eli's name out loud. Not in whispers or tears, but in full sentences, in stories, in memories. He's a part of our everyday now, not just the ghost that lived in the corner of every room. I don't know what will happen when I see him again. I don't know what he'll remember, or what he'll carry. But I know what I'll say, that I never gave up, that I never stopped being his mother, that no one, not even the people who claim to love us, could take that away. Some days I think about Jessica. I wonder if she feels guilt, if she dreams of Eli too, but I don't let that live in me for long. Her story is no longer mine to carry. This is mine. The story of a woman who lost everything and still kept going, who held her daughter close when the world closed in, who dug for answers when everyone else begged her to stop. I tell it because I know there are other mothers out there, mothers who've been silenced, who were told they were too much, too emotional, too broken. I want them to know they're not. And I want them to know that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you once trusted with everything, the ones who hugged you at night and smiled through their teeth. Letting go of them wasn't easy, but holding on to myself was worth it. Now every morning, Sophie and I walk to the edge of our street and look at the horizon. She talks about the day Eli will come home, about what she'll say, what she'll wear, what games they'll play. I just listen. Let her dream. Because this time, I believe it too. The truth didn't destroy me. It freed me. And in that space where silence used to be, there is something else now. Light. Air. A future. We're still a family. Not the one I started with, but the one I fought for. And that's enough.